How you doing? Holy freaking Lord, it is cold, man. But we're out here to give you another little tour, baby. We're gonna give you a little taste of of a neighborhood here in Brooklyn known as Gravesend. A lot of cool history here. We're gonna cover the hell out of it. Cam, how are you?
I'm a bit chilly.
I'm freezing my freaking eyeballs out. Before we start, guys, check out the Patreon. That's how we fund these things. Some extras on there. It's how I'm gonna afford another layer. This thing is not doing the trick today. Also, too, like and subscribe. If you've seen one of these before, you know it's gonna be good, baby. So do that. Otherwise, we got a lot of history to cover, man. There's some cool stuff going on here in Gravesend, this little town. God, I keep saying town. It's a freaking neighborhood. Right next to like Coney Island, all that. So we got a lot to cover. Cam, you ready to go?
I can't feel my face.
I haven't felt anything in years, and it's only been made worse by today. So let's get going, baby. All right, how you doing? How you doing? We're gonna start at the beginning, okay? So one of the things to know about Gravesend, it's old. It was actually settled in 1643, and it was actually created in a block grid by the initial creator of the town, which we'll get to at the next stop. But if you look at the actual grid of the area, you can see this little square with little actual squares with little squares inside. That's how they was set up. And I'm actually in front of the Gravesend Cemetery, which was started in 1643. It's one of the oldest city cemeteries in New York. There's people in there from the American Revolution. Ever heard of it? There's also some of the more famous families of Brooklyn, like the Sidams and the Wyckoffs. You know, all those super famous families that you probably never heard of. But isn't that comforting to know that no matter how hard you work and all the stuff you accomplish, you'll probably be forgotten by history? Isn't that nice? Makes you realize that, we're all just ashes and dust, right? Anyways, this is the Gravesend Cemetery. It's believed that Lady Deborah Moody is buried here in an unmarked grave. She, we're going to talk about at the next stop, is the person who founded this town. Very interesting story. Now, Gravesend was one of the 6 original towns of New Amsterdam, although it was the only one started as an English town. It was started by an English woman, who we'll get to, like I said, but it was called Gravesend, they believe, because of Gravesend, which is actually a town in England on the Thames River. And there's other theories about it, but that's the one that I came across the most. All right, so relax before you start typing in the comments. It's freaking freezing out here. Cut me some slack. That's the one that seems like the most likely. And like I said, it was one of the 6 original towns. A very important thing to know about early Brooklyn and this side of Long Island is that there were 6 towns. Brooklyn was one of them. And it eventually gobbled up all the others, including Gravesend in 1894. But by 1894, Gravesend had already had its own air of self-sufficiency. It was its own little town, right? And it got pulled in to Brooklyn before Brooklyn was pulled in 1898 into greater New York City, right? Remember the consolidation of New York City in 1898. Got to remember that, baby. So yeah, this also served as kind of a stopping point on the way to Coney Island, which is just near here. I did a video on Coney Island. You should watch that one, you freaks. Also, Coney Island known for, had racetracks, had a lot of a lot of people partying and hanging out. So a lot of the riffraff that would go there would pass through here. So that was something that people here didn't really like as much as well. This is towards the end of the 1800s, remember, because before that, this was a sleepy little town. You had your little block grid, but everything around it was farms. So you can pass through, man, go for it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no problem, man, no problem. Yeah. Have a good day. So yeah, this is Gravesend Cemetery, very old little part of Gravesend. And it was at the end of the 1800s that this area became more connected to the rest of the city. So you remember Ocean Parkway runs right on the eastern edge of Gravesend. Ocean Parkway, as I talked about in the Brighton Beach video. You can watch that one. It was designed by Calvert Vaux, Frederick Law Olmsted, the Bash Bros who designed Central Park, you know that. Ocean Parkway right down the western edge of Prospect Park, and you had Eastern Parkway going east on the northern end of Prospect Park. So you also had the subway, the elevated railway, which is still right here, that came about also in the end of the 1800s. It wasn't the subway yet, but it was the elevated railway. Relax before you people start correcting me. So it started to get slowly more connected. But we're gonna get to all that here in a second. This is the beginnings, baby. Remember, little small town, block grid, farms, Lady Deborah Moody, who we're gonna talk about at the next stop. Let's go, Cam. My hands are freezing. I know I should have worn gloves. Okay, relax, I didn't have them. I forgot. Let's go. Well, we went to the next stop here, pretty much right across the street. This is known as the Lady Deborah Moody house. Important thing to point out right off the bat is she probably didn't live here. That's because a guy named Platt eventually bought it. It's called the Hicks Platt Van Sicklen house. But this guy Platt owned it, and guess what? He was a real estate developer, and they say he started the rumor Lady Deborah Moody lived here to kind of, I guess, make himself seem cooler. Now, that's pretty pathetic. Not like me. My apartment actually was where Prince lived with Rod Stewart in Queens. They were roommates. So Lady Deborah Moody is a very important figure here. She's the one who established this whole town. So she came here and settled in 1643, got the charter in 1645 from Willem Kieft, who I've talked about in the past. He was the Director General of New Amsterdam at the time. He's the one who started a bunch of dumb wars with the Native Americans here that sank the colony, and he was eventually replaced by Peter Stuyvesant in 1647, who then whipped the colony into shape, only to be taken away by the British in 1664. So Willem Kieft is the guy who granted her the land here in Gravesend. Now, what's interesting about her is that she was a widow, Lady Deborah Moody, very fancy name, Lady, and I'm with you, I'm smiling. You know that song? You don't know Styx? Anyways, Lady, sorry if I scared you guys with that singing. But Lady Deborah Moody was the widow of a guy in England. So she used to live in England. Her husband dies and she leaves because she's an Anabaptist and she was being persecuted by the Church of England. Anabaptists were similar to Quakers, a little more like Christian than Quakers. It's a whole thing, but she went basically to Massachusetts, where there were lots of Puritans who were also being persecuted in England, and they had founded Massachusetts Bay Colony. Oh, so she went down there where she's like, hey, this is great, man. They're going to accept me. You know, they were persecuted, and that's not exactly what happened. They actually were going to call her to trial for her beliefs. They considered her a dangerous woman, which is actually still a misdemeanor in some southern cities. And she, instead of going to her trial, was like, screw this, I'm getting out of here. She came to New Amsterdam and was given this land by Willem Kieft in 1643. In 1645, she was given the land, and it's chartered as Gravesend. She modeled it after Kent, England. Remember, she came from England. Her husband was a sir, making her a lady of the morning. Sun shines in your eyes. You know that song, right? Really? Man, I thought it's the second time I tried. So she was booted pretty much and came down here to New Amsterdam, which, believe it or not, at the time was kind of this like bastion of free religion, not for lack of trying to persecute people. Peter Stuyvesant famously tried to persecute the Quakers and actually rejected immigration of Jewish people who came here, the first Jews who came here from Brazil at the time. But both of them were overruled basically by the new Dutch East. Ooh, dang, that's cold, man. Oh, the Dutch West India Company, and it was basically because this was a corporate town initially by the Dutch West India Company. They were just interested in people who were going to come here, work hard, and not rock the boat. So she becomes the first woman in the New World to get basically a charter and a patent on a town, which is pretty incredible. So that's what you're walking through when you're here in Gravesend. You're walking through history. Lady Deborah Moody. Anyway, she's given this land, and this is, like I said, the house that they believe, well, they don't, this guy made it up pretty much, okay? But this is an old house. There are some estimates that have it being built in the 1660s. They also believe it may be 1700, but believe it or not, was recently put on sale. This was actually on sale for less than $1 million, which is pretty wild. You know, you could see the pictures there. You could see the old colonial cat tree that's in the picture there. But I believe it was bought. Pretty nice little house, pretty cool. Imagine living in a house that was built in the 1600s, pretty wild. You think your radiator gives you trouble. Imagine that's probably much worse. And so they gave her about 7,000 acres to start her own town. Most of it was marsh and wetlands, not ideal towns, but obviously it's been filled in over time. Keep in mind, she wasn't the first Anabaptist who was booted from Massachusetts. If you may not remember the name Anne Hutchinson, who's famous in the Bronx. She was given a bunch of land in the Bronx, was actually murdered eventually in that area. But she was given land in the Bronx, and she was also an Anabaptist who was booted by the Massachusetts people. Those crazy Massachusetts people. This is Lady Deborah Moody. Huh? She served lots of functions in the colony. She helped nominate and elect magistrates. She helped solve disputes with the city government at the time, so she was very well known here. And a leader, an early leader in New Amsterdam, Lady Deborah Moody. You got to remember these names, man. You know, history is filled with a lot of dudes. Well, this is a dudette who's in there. All right, so another thing that Gravesend is famous for is the Sephardic Jewish community. This is actually one of the biggest Sephardic Jewish communities in New York City. So just so you know, Sephardic Jews make up about 10% of the total Jewish population in New York. As you know, famous comedian Lenny Bruce once said that in New York, even if you're Catholic, you're Jewish. Don't worry, he was Jewish. That would be a very different statement, I guess, if he wasn't, but you get it. There's a lot of Jewish people here, over 1 million in New York, which is a good amount, and like I said, 10% are Sephardic, so there's a difference. So you have Ashkenazim and Sephardim, the Eastern European, Central European Jews that came over in the late 1800s, early 1900s. A lot of them were Ashkenazi, but Sephardic also came over. Sephardic basically, so the split dates back to around the year 1000, which is a long time ago, and basically, generally speaking, the Northern Africa, Mediterranean, and Middle Eastern area are more Sephardic, and then Central European and Eastern European are the Ashkenazi, and they are the ones who came over in droves because of the pogroms, end of the 1800s, early 1900s, but also, like I said, Sephardic as well. They have different customs, different foods. In fact, you guys may know the language, the Yiddish language, which is basically like a mix of Hebrew and German. That is more Ashkenazi, whereas Ladino is more the Sephardic, I guess, language, and that is Spanish and Hebrew. So look at that, you're learning stuff. Did you know that, Cam? All right, well now you do. So I'm sitting in front of Shara Zion, which is actually a congregation here from 1941, a Sephardic Jewish congregation. Pretty cool, huh? A lot of Jewish congregations here, Sephardic congregations as well, and this is one of the things that it's famous for. And these families have lived here for generations now. A lot of them have knocked down some of the houses around here and made it built up bigger and nicer houses. 30% of the Jews in New York City live in Brooklyn, so Brooklyn has the most. And here, you have, like I said, you have the Sephardic. They also have different foods. You know, latkes happen to be more associated with the Ashkenazi, whereas sufganot, sorry if I'm butchering that, is like a little jelly donut. That sounds pretty good, huh? That's associated with the Sephardic. And the word Ashkenaz actually refers to Germany or the German area, whereas Sepharad refers to Iberia or the Spain area where they're associated with. It's important to note too that while the Ashkenazi made up a majority of the immigrants in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the ones that we've talked about in the Lower East Side, for example, which you can watch in my video, you know, Sephardic were the earliest Jewish immigrants here. I talked about how the first immigrants came from Brazil. They were associated with Portugal. Those were Sephardic Jews in the year 1654. And they were the ones that Peter Stuyvesant tried to turn away. Nice try, Petey. But yeah, they actually were associated with the beginnings of the Shearith Israel congregation, which is still around today in the Upper West Side. Kind of wild, dates back to the 1600s. So yeah, very deep roots here in Gravesend, but this is one of the things that the neighborhood is famous for. You walk around here on Ocean Parkway, you'll see the mezuzahs on the doors, you'll see the different businesses and things, and yeah, there you go. Little, you know, sorry, I always get, it's kind of ridiculous, I guess, that I get annoyed by the sound of an ambulance driving by. There's someone in the back of that ambulance fighting for their life, and here I am annoyed that my YouTube video is getting interrupted. This is a really great neighborhood with a lot of Jewish history, so Lord have mercy on my soul. I'm freezing. What do you think of that, Cam? Pretty interesting, huh? Sephardic Jewish stronghold of Gravesend. One of the things it's famous for, in addition to Lady Deborah Moody. But that's not it, baby. We got more to talk about, so let's keep it moving. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to talk about another thing this neighborhood is famous for, and that is its Italian population. Now, obviously, Italians are all over Brooklyn. In fact, we're right next to Bensonhurst, which we talked about in my Bensonhurst video. I already mentioned that I did that one. You should watch it. But yeah, Italians are huge here in Brooklyn. You have the N train that comes right near here, the F train. These were subway lines that eventually got out here and brought people from the parts of Manhattan, which were being basically overflowed with Italians. So, you know, remember, Italians started coming here in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Remember, Italy wasn't a united country until 1870. It was all different regions. The uniting of them also brought problems. So there was, you know, poverty, and especially in the South, things like that. So they came over here. All right, so I'm actually standing in front of L&B Spumoni Gardens, which was started by Ludovico Barbatti, which was, he came actually from Torella di Lombardi in Campania, Italy. And he made it over here in 1938. He started going around on a little carriage, a little like a cart pulled by a horse, selling his pizza that he loves so much. Yeah, that's how he was doing it, on a horse and cart. I guess they had the under 470 minutes or it's free guarantee. Get you in your horse and cart. But eventually the next year he borrowed some money and opened a little brick and mortar store, and it's been expanded a few times over the years, but it's still here, man, 1939. And it is incredible. They have the sheets of the Sicilian, the upside down. You know that song, Cam?
You got me. I got that one.
Okay, cool. Anyways, it's upside down, little Sicilian pizza, very good. Very good. And they have also spumoni, which is a little Sicilian treat. It's like pistachio, almond type of little ice cream here mix. Also very good. Big Italian population here as well. Now, an interesting fact about this pizzeria was that a little bit ago, there was a Colombo crime family connection with this pizzeria, and a Bonanno associate who had passed through and been exposed to this restaurant opened a pizzeria in Staten Island with the same upside down recipe. And so there was a big, I guess, dispute over that, and they had a sit down about this issue, to where they actually were able to settle, and there was a payment involved and all that stuff. There was a mob sit down about a pizza recipe. How much more Italian can you get? You know? What do they say at that sit down? Like, I'm gonna make them a 2-for-1 offer with breadsticks you can't refuse. Huh? Come on. There's also other businesses and restaurants. Another one is Joe's of Avenue U, which has been there for 60 years. Really good food there, eating there as well. A lot of Italians here in Gravesend, right next to Bensonhurst. A lot of Italians down here, man. That's for sure. But I'm freezing. Guys, I can't emphasize that enough. So let's go inside and get some pizza, baby, and then move on. Come on. All right, and we just made it. We're freezing. We got to get out of here. But you just saw a little survey, if you will, of Gravesend. Today, it's got obviously new immigrants coming in, a lot of Latin American, and there's a big Chinatown actually on Avenue U. It's known mostly as being over in Homecrest, which is a neighborhood to the east, but there is some Chinese here as well, a good amount actually. And there's some fancy mansions and everything too as well. Over here at 2134 Ocean Parkway is one of the more expensive houses in Brooklyn. Was listed at $14 million a few years ago, 9,200 square feet. Look at these pictures, man. Inside it looks like a mob boss lives there or something. Could use a little bit on the decorating side, but you know what I mean. We covered Lady Deborah Moody. We covered the cemetery. We covered the Italians. We covered the Jewish population. It's even Shar Zion, which is the Syrian Sephardic congregation there. So yeah, I don't know. Cam, what'd you think, man? Did you learn something?
I think I'm smarter now.
I think you're smarter too. I think you're smarter too. I think we'll be a lot smarter once we get the hell out of this weather. But yeah, if you liked it, check out the Patreon, baby. A lot of extras there. Covered this already also too. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. And yeah, man, that's pretty much it. Let's go, man. Let's go find a coffee shop or something. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for making it this far, huh? That's an accomplishment. You sat through something for almost 20 minutes. Huh? You didn't have to scroll up. Good for you. See y'all later. Sick.